The comfort of never being truly alone had settled upon Ruth like a warm blanket, yet she noticed several in the gathering still bore the unmistakable countenance of inner turmoil. What manner of peace could possibly quiet the racing thoughts that had carved permanent furrows between their brows, thoughts that neither the assurance of divine presence nor human companionship seemed capable of silencing? Night had fully descended upon the Galilean hillside. The moon, nearly full, cast silver light across the water, and a few oil lamps flickered among the assembly, creating pools of amber warmth in the darkness. The transformation from twilight to true night seemed to mirror a shifting in Jesus' teaching, from external concerns to the deeper territories of the human heart. Ruth observed those around her, a woman with tense posture, an older man bearing signs of persistent mental fatigue. These were souls battling interior storms that continued even when external circumstances were calm. Jesus' voice took on a different quality now, gentle yet penetrating. "You have heard it said that peace means the absence of conflict," he began, "the cessation of struggle or the elimination of difficulty." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. "But I give you peace that differs from what the world offers. Not the removal of storms, but stability within them." The semantic distinction seemed profoundly important, Ruth realized. The peace Jesus described wasn't contingent upon favorable circumstances or the resolution of difficulties. It represented an internal state that could exist independently of external conditions, precisely the state that had eluded her through countless sleepless nights. "Consider the depths of the sea," Jesus continued, gesturing toward the dark waters before them. "On the surface, waves crash and winds create turmoil. Yet descend below, to the deep places, and there you find stillness untouched by the tempest above. This is the peace I offer you, not the elimination of surface storms, but access to depths they cannot disturb." The metaphor resonated among the gathering. Ruth noticed a collective easing of tension, as if the assembly were beginning to comprehend this distinctive form of peace. "The troubled mind," Jesus said, "is like a vessel overloaded with cargo meant for other ships to carry." He stretched out his hands, palms upward in invitation. "Come to me, all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Ruth considered how this ancient wisdom aligned with what she understood of the mind's functioning. Modern understanding recognized how the brain could become overwhelmed, exactly what Jesus addressed in speaking of burdens not meant for human shoulders to carry alone. Jesus now moved among the gathering, his voice lowering to intimate counsel. "Many of you lie awake replaying old words, revisiting old wounds, rehearsing old failures. But understand this, forgiveness is not merely something you extend to others, it is something you must accept for yourself." He stopped beside a middle-aged man whose face bore the marks of shame. "Your Father has removed your transgressions as far as the east is from the west. Why do you continually journey to retrieve what he has discarded?" The man began to weep silently. Ruth found herself confronting her own cycles of self-recrimination, the mental flagellation over past decisions, failed relationships, missed opportunities. This exhausting pattern had become so familiar she hardly recognized its relentless drain on her mental resources. "The mind that cannot rest," Jesus continued, "is often a mind that refuses to practice forgiveness, toward others, yes, but equally toward oneself." He paused then, and to Ruth's surprise, simply sat down cross-legged on the sand. For several moments, the gathering grew utterly still, with only the gentle lapping of water against the shore and soft breathing breaking the silence. "Be still," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and know that I am God." This invitation to stillness seemed paradoxically active, not emptiness but engaged receptivity. Ruth found herself allowing her awareness to rest in the present moment rather than darting anxiously between past and future. "The mind given to constant activity," Jesus said after the shared silence, "has forgotten its true purpose. It was designed not as a theater of endless performance but as a sanctuary of divine communion." This reframing struck Ruth forcefully. She had never considered that her cognitive faculties might have a deeper purpose than problem-solving or analyzing. The human mind, engineered primarily for relationship with its creator, represented a profound paradigm shift. Jesus began to speak words of blessing over the assembly. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." As he spoke, Ruth noticed people gradually succumbing to sleep. Their faces softened, the furrows between brows temporarily smoothed by profound rest. Ruth experienced a mental quieting, not forced silencing of thought but a natural settling, like sediment gradually descending through water until clarity remains. Her thoughts, which normally raced like frantic messengers, now moved with the unhurried rhythm of gentle waves reaching shore. Your mind will return to activity, Jesus said, but it need not return to anxiety. When thoughts arise that disturb your peace, simply bring them to me. Cast your anxieties upon me, for I care for you. As the night deepened, Jesus continued teaching in progressively softer tones. Remember that peace is not the product of perfect circumstances but of perfect trust. Not the fruit of having all answers but of knowing the one who does. The gentle invitation, "Come unto me and rest." As Jesus' teaching on trust settled over the gathering like evening dew, his countenance shifted subtly, his eyes reflecting ancient wisdom about the sacred nature of human rest. The transition was nearly imperceptible, like the gradual deepening of twilight into night, yet the atmosphere around the hillside transformed. One by one, members of the assembly yielded to a profound stillness. Children who had been fidgeting earlier now slumbered peacefully in their parents' embrace. Elderly listeners leaned against each other, their breathing slow and synchronized with the gentle rhythm of the nearby waters. Throughout the assembly, eyelids grew heavy as Jesus' words about perfect trust continued to resonate in the night air. The natural amphitheater had become a sanctuary of collective tranquility. Ruth observed this transformation with a mixture of wonder and resistance, feeling herself being drawn towards sleep yet struggling against it. A peculiar tension arose within her, the profound drowsiness enveloping her consciousness conflicted with her determination to remain fully present. I can't sleep now, she thought, fighting against the heaviness in her limbs. Not when I'm here, not when he's speaking. She recognized her contradiction. In a moment devoted to teachings about rest, she actively resisted the very surrender being offered. Why do I always resist what I most need? Jesus seemed to perceive this internal struggle in Ruth and several others who maintained their vigilance despite evident exhaustion. His voice took on a new quality as he addressed them directly, becoming softer yet somehow more penetrating, like water finding the smallest fissures in stone. Come to me, he invited, his tone imbued with tender authority, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. The simplicity of these words carried a gravitational pull. Ruth felt tears forming in response to their profound welcome. This was an acknowledgement of the universal human experience of weariness while offering something beyond mere physical respite. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, Jesus continued, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. The word souls lingered in the night air. Ruth contemplated how different this understanding of rest was from her contemporary conception. Modern society viewed sleep as a biological necessity, a temporary escape before returning to productivity. But Jesus spoke of something far more profound, a restoration reaching beyond physical fatigue into the deepest regions of human existence. The rest I offer, Jesus explained, his voice now carrying the gentle cadence of a lullaby, is not merely the absence of activity but the presence of peace. Not an escape from life but a restoration to life as it was meant to be lived. His hands moved expressively as he spoke, drawing imagery in the moonlight. Consider how a child falls asleep, he said, gesturing toward a small boy who had surrendered to slumber in his mother's arms. There is no striving, no effort, no technique. The child simply releases himself into the arms that hold him, trusting completely in their safety. Ruth observed the sleeping child, his face completely relaxed. In this image she saw everything she had forgotten, the complete abandon, the absolute trust, the perfect peace that comes not from effort but from relationship. How long had it been since she had known such surrender? You have made rest into labor, Jesus continued, as if reading her thoughts. You have transformed surrender into struggle. Yet true rest comes not from mastering techniques but from releasing yourself into hands greater than your own. The implications extended beyond physical sleep into a comprehensive philosophy of existence. Jesus was addressing the fundamental orientation of consciousness toward trust rather than control. When you lie down, Jesus said, his voice growing even gentler, do not take your burdens with you into the night. Release them as you release your waking consciousness. The same Father who has sustained you through the day will maintain your breath through the darkness. This daily surrender to sleep is a rehearsal for the greater surrenders of your life. As Jesus spoke, Ruth noticed him beginning to move among the gathering. With infinite tenderness, he placed his hand on the head of an elderly man whose eyes had been fighting to stay open. At the moment of contact, the man's expression softened completely, and he slipped into peaceful slumber. A young woman nearby received the same blessing, her anxious features smoothing into tranquility. This progression created a wave of deepening peace. Those still awake watched with anticipation as Jesus approached, not with fear but with yearning for his touch. Ruth found herself holding her breath as he drew nearer. In surrendering to sleep, Jesus said as he moved, his voice barely above a whisper yet perfectly audible, "You practice dying to your own efforts and rising again renewed," a daily parable of resurrection. When Jesus finally stood before Ruth, time seemed to suspend itself. His eyes met hers with perfect recognition, seeing the accumulated weight of sleepless nights and relentless self-reliance she had carried. Without speaking, he extended his hand toward her head. Ruth felt no need to speak. The moment transcended language. As Jesus' hand rested on her head, a sensation of warmth radiated through her entire body like honey. The chaotic activity of her mind, the perpetual planning and analyzing, smoothed into a single awareness of being profoundly held. "Peace," Jesus said simply, the word containing within it every blessing she had ever needed. Ruth's resistance dissolved completely. The distinction between surrendering to sleep and surrendering to divine care blurred into a single act of profound trust. She understood that sleep was not a state to be feared but a holy invitation to release herself completely into the care of the one who had created rest itself. The return journey, bridging worlds of sleep and wakefulness. The boundary between sacred dream and waking reality is not the impermeable barrier we imagine, but rather a permeable membrane through which divine presence can flow unimpeded. In the delicate transition from night to dawn, Ruth would discover that the peace she found in Galilee wasn't confined to the realm of sleep but was preparing to reshape her waking hours in ways she never anticipated. Beneath the star-scattered canopy of the Galilean night, the gathering had fallen silent. Bodies that had earlier been tense with anticipation now rested in various attitudes of repose, children curled against parents, elderly listeners with heads gently tilted back, young adults stretched out on woven mats they had brought. The communal experience of sacred rest had transformed the shoreline into a tableau of profound tranquility, unlike anything Ruth had witnessed in her contemporary world where sleep was pursued individually, often unsuccessfully, behind closed doors. Ruth herself had settled onto the soft sand, her consciousness hovering in that exquisite space between wakefulness and slumber where perception remains but resistance has ceased. Yet now, she began to sense a subtle shift. The solidity of the Galilean shore wavered slightly at its edges, like a reflection disturbed by gentle ripples. She recognized with a pang of reluctance that she was being called back to her apartment, back to her responsibilities, back to a world where divine presence seemed more abstract than immediate. Ruth instinctively resisted, her spirit clinging to this sacred space where anxiety had no dominion. "Must I return?" she whispered, not expecting an answer in this liminal space between worlds. To her surprise, Jesus, who had been moving among the sleeping forms of his listeners, paused and turned toward her. His expression held a gentle knowing. He approached and knelt beside her on the sand. "You carry what you have received," he said simply, his voice containing a timbre meant for a single listener rather than a gathering. "The boundary you perceive between this moment and your waking life exists more in thought than in truth." Ruth struggled to articulate her fear. "But there, in my time, everything feels so separate. God seems distant. Prayer feels like speaking into emptiness." Jesus nodded, acknowledging her experience without contradiction. "The distance is an illusion created by perception, not by reality. I am as present in your bedroom as I am on this shore. The peace you have found here does not belong to Galilee, nor to this moment in time, it belongs to the eternal now that intersects all moments." As he spoke, the sounds of gentle waves began to intermingle with the pre-dawn sounds of her apartment. These overlapping soundscapes harmonized, suggesting two worlds as different expressions of a unified reality. "How will I maintain this peace when I return to my daily anxieties?" Ruth asked, sensing her time growing short. Jesus placed his hand over hers, the warmth of his touch anchoring her momentarily between worlds. You have been practicing surrender to sleep as a physical necessity. Now practice it as a spiritual act, a daily letting go, a regular rehearsal of release. When you lie down each night, remember that you are entrusting yourself to something larger than your consciousness. And when you wake, carry that same trust into your day. Ruth felt a profound truth transcending mere advice. He was describing a fundamental reorientation of her relationship with both sleep and wakefulness, complementary rhythms within a greater harmony. The peace I leave with you, Jesus continued, travels between worlds because it belongs fully to neither. It exists in the space where divine reality touches human experience. That intersection is not limited to dreams or visions, it is the underlying structure of all existence. The physical sensations of her body underwent a transformation. The warmth of the Galilean evening seamlessly became the warmth of her bed covers. The gentle pressure of sand beneath her gradually transformed into the familiar contours of her mattress. Unlike previous abrupt transitions, this metamorphosis unfolded with grace. Jesus's voice took on an echo quality, as if speaking simultaneously from the shoreline and from within her consciousness. Remember that waking is itself a kind of birth, a daily resurrection. The ancients understood what modern minds have forgotten, that the boundary between sleeping and waking is sacred. Will I remember this? She asked, suddenly fearful that the profound peace would evaporate like morning mist. Jesus smiled, the expression illuminating his features even as they began to blur. The mind may forget details, but the spirit retains transformation. What matters is not that you recall every word spoken but that you have been altered by our encounter. The peace you carry now is not a memory to preserve but a presence to recognize. As the last vestiges of the Galilean scene dissolved, Ruth experienced not a jarring dislocation but an elegant integration, her consciousness incorporating the sacred encounter into her very being. The transition completed itself with extraordinary gentleness. Ruth opened her eyes to the familiar shadows of her bedroom, illuminated by the first hint of dawn. As light breached the darkness, she recalled the psalmist's words, "I awake, and I am still with you." The phrase resonated through her consciousness, bridging ancient wisdom with her present moment of rebirth. For a moment she lay perfectly still, anticipating the return of her customary morning anxiety. Instead, she encountered a profound stillness at her core. The worries were observable at the periphery of her awareness, but they no longer constituted the gravitational center of her consciousness. Ruth drew a deep breath and realized with quiet astonishment that she felt rested in a deeper dimension she had almost forgotten existed. The peace from the Galilean shore had followed her across the threshold between worlds, not as a fading remnant but as a continuing reality. As she slowly sat up, Ruth noticed her familiar surroundings had subtly altered. Her bedroom remained unchanged, yet she experienced it differently, as if the walls that had previously seemed to separate her from the larger world had become more permeable, transparent to a presence that permeated all spaces equally. As our journey with Ruth draws to a close, we recognize that what we've witnessed is not merely an ancient story preserved in text, but a living encounter reaching into our modern bedrooms with the same gentle power that once comforted weary souls along Galilean shores. These teachings function as bridges connecting our contemporary anxieties to timeless solutions, the invitation to rest extending to each of us as a sanctuary within life's complexities. The peace Jesus offered remains accessible now as you prepare for sleep, acknowledging your struggles while providing context for transcending them. Like a steadfast flame that endures through darkness, may this ancient wisdom accompany you as consciousness yields to slumber, remaining your companion through the night and into tomorrow's light.